People who grew up middle or upper class, what did you not believe about low income households, but it was actually true? That quote, there's a time when your parents can't and don't bail you out anymore, and that's so terrifying. So that was said by an ex of mine. I grew up in a low middle class household, not super broke, but comfortable enough that I can't give too many legit complaints, at least about that aspect. And I ended up with a girl who came from a very well off family, at least financially. Her grandpa made it huge with some airliner and lived frugally himself, but basically gave her every damn thing she wanted and bailed her out of every stupid scenario she could get herself into. To make a long, crappy story short, she stabbed me in the back and cost me a damn mountain of time and money. Her grandpa, of course, bailed her the heck out of legal costs, finding a new home, car payments, anything to keep her from having to face any sort of problems for what she later referred to as the screw up of her life. Fast forward 7 years, I'm doing all right financially, and she contacts me out of the blue one day. Turns out she had a freaking revelation and reality check that she badly needed. Her grandpa had cut her off after the BS between me and her. The legal costs and her car were the last thing he did for her, and he didn't even let her come back to live in his spare room. She was out on her bum, pregnant with someone else's kid, and not a freaking clue what to do. At this point, she was now living with her kid and someone else as a roommate, and trying to figure out what to do for school at 31 years old after dropping out of med school while she was with me. Didn't know she did that at the time, another tally in the list of stupid choices. But this reconnection wasn't a please take me back kind of thing, but after living in crap for 7 years, she realized how badly she screwed up and how much I had actually done for her and put it on the line. She was a hardline Catholic conservative when I knew her before, and she always thought that poor people are poor because they're lazy. And now she came back with a pretty different mindset. Hold on. Okay, I get it, but also wouldn't her lesson here be exactly that being lazy and making stupid choices are what really led to her poverty? I mean, in her case, both items are A, facts, and B, the direct and exclusive cause of her situation. But you know what? I'm also overthinking things, so let's go back to the next story. Story 2. For reference, I grew up wealthy, but due to family circumstances, I had to cut ties this year. I'm 19. First, travel costs money and it adds up fast, and I don't mean like travel. I mean using the metro. People are often shocked when they invite me over and they find out I walked all the way. $2.75 adds up. My rule is usually no public transport for anything a mile away, but I've walked much more than that at times. Second, cold winters suck. I used to not like winter, but hey, at least I had a big coat. I don't own one now, and I avoid going outside because of it. Like literally, I just don't go outside unless I absolutely have to. Coupled with me not using the metro, it's a miserable time out there. Third, people can have literally no money. I used to think broke was not having much money, but broke can be $0 or less. I didn't realize that until I was there. Fourth, you don't have the money to advance yourself. Interview clothes, MetroCard money to go to interviews. If you're having a rough time, you might not have spent enough time networking to have good references. Fifth, college textbook prices are evil, man, and I mean a lot more when you're poor too. I had to drop out of a class because I couldn't afford the book prices, and I had to go a long time without doing the reading in a couple of classes because I didn't have the money. And it's a lot harder to do well in classes when you have to work or you're freaking out being homeless, or when you have a mental illness that needs treatment and you don't have health insurance. 6, socially, it's a nightmare. I can't do anything with anyone. I have to turn most things down unless they're free. And even then, free usually entails going somewhere with public transportation. It gets boring. 7th, food prep takes time. The cheapest thing to do is to get materials from scratch. God bless rice and beans. So any free time you have, you're going to spend cooking. The good news is you'll probably get good at it. It gets interesting when you're on your last ingredients and have to make a combination out of whatever random things you actually have. 8th, screw my credit. I don't have the money. I have medical debt sitting unpaid and I don't give a damn right now. Screw my credit to hell, I can't pay it. When you're wealthy, everyone always lectures you on the importance of good credit, and everyone acts like needing to take out a loan or missing a payment is the worst thing in the world. It was scary for me to realize that it was not only okay to have debt, but basically necessary. 9th, yeah, you end up stinky. New clothes cost money. Laundry costs a lot of money. The sniff test is your best friend. And even then, sometimes you're just going to have to smell. And finally, 10th, your place will be dirty. Cleaning supplies are expensive. Your time is valuable, spent either working, cooking, or stressing the heck out over what your life has become. So you try your best, but there's only so much soap and water can do. Even though I got a dependency override, it's still a toss up over whether I'll be able to go to school next semester. And if I can't, I'll lose housing and end up on the streets. The stress is real, and none of growing up pampered could have prepared me for it. Story 3. I grew up pretty privileged, but I wasn't too sheltered. I know I never felt rich growing up. It's hard to feel rich when your friends' parents are some of the richest people in the country or the world. I thought we were just merely comfortable. What I did believe was that poor people and substance dependents were that way because they didn't have as much willpower to succeed. My mother was a very successful businesswoman and she was entirely self made. Well, why couldn't other people be like her? Going through that Ayn Rand phase in my teens didn't help either, of course. Studying economics in university again didn't help. We were taught minimum wage was bad for the economy, so were unions. Trust the market, that whole jazz. I was a proud libertarian. Then I became seriously hooked on smack. I met a lot of people I wouldn't have met otherwise, and that made me see the light. One of my dealers in particular, we would shoot and talk about smoking ice. She had always known she was going to be a dealer. Her father had been a dealer with multiple prison sentences. All her siblings were either hooked on illegal substances or selling them or in prison. She couldn't imagine a life without it. She didn't know it. I would think, if I were born in her place, could I have pulled myself out of it? I knew I couldn't have. After all, I was sitting right next to her, even after going to all the best schools and never wanting for anything, at least materially. I am no longer hooked on smack, but that part of my life changed me forever, and it's one reason why I can't entirely regret my years being dependent on it. It taught me empathy, to see people as people, not numbers. Maybe getting older would have changed me anyway, who knows, but I am still grateful. Well, it does suck that it was substance dependency that helped change this guy's perspective, but it seems like he turned it out into a positive, so congrats on kicking the habit and learning new things. Story 4. I'm currently in high school junior year and my family's in a pretty good place financially. Normally, I wouldn't just put this on the net, but both of my parents are state employees, so their pay is public anyway. My father makes about $65,000 before overtime and about $80,000 afterwards. My mother makes a little more, about $86,000. Right now, we live comfortably, but when my mother was pregnant, my dad got laid off by his previous employer, a film developing and processing plant. At the time, they were already in debt and the family home was in pretty rough shape. And at the time, my mom was a teacher in an underfunded preschool program operating out of a church basement. I don't have the exact numbers, but our household income was probably about $35,000 at the time. Luckily, after a few years, my dad found a job as an HVAC tech and my mom moved to a better funded school district. Since I was so young, I don't remember a whole lot about the time period where money was scarce, but I do remember the Christmas presents I got. I believe when I was 5, I got a $10 plastic sled and a few smaller Lego sets. Compared to today, it's hard to believe that just 10 years ago my family lived such a different lifestyle. Nowadays, we eat well and enjoy some luxuries that I know I'm lucky to have. I've always had friends from lower income families, so I don't have the same type of moment that some have had. But watching one of my friends live, he's my age, his father passed away a few years back, and his mother works as a lunch lady in a local school, has always kept me in check. I don't want to look back at my life and see a pampered brat who got whatever he wanted. I'm not taking financial aid from my parents in my college years, just enough to pay for food and basic things. But there is something I want other middle upper class kids to learn here. Don't be ashamed of having more money than your friends or peers. But humility is the most important value that you can learn in life. Treat lower income people as your equals because they are. There is a lot of talk about the growing wealth of the 1% in our society, and the only way that we can begin to dismantle classism in our world is to understand each other better. I could be the son of Scrooge McDuck or the son of a addled McDonald's worker. It makes no difference. Story 5. I'll share a story that woke me up. I was a manager on a PC refresh where we had employees out in the field. Since they were traveling, one of their perks was that we gave them $50 a day for food. All they had to do was send in their receipts. I was approving receipts for the week and noticed that one of our employees had only submitted a receipt for $25. So I called him to make sure he understood how the reimbursement process worked and to ask for the rest of his receipts, which typically were around $300 a week. He told me that all he bought for the week was bread and bologna since he didn't have the money to front the expenses, which is why the receipt was so low. I was floored. And that is when I started to realize what it means to not have any savings or access to credit. Needless to say, we fronted him the money the next week. Can I come and work for you? Because $50 a day for food, yeah, pretty good deal to me. I will clean while I'm on my belly with a one bristle toothbrush for that kind of stuff. Seriously, though, he sounds like a fantastic and caring manager. Wish we all had something like that in our lives. What he did probably blew that guy's mind. He did something above and beyond. Anyway, since you're already here, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Story 6. I don't have a concept of kids not having new toys, clothes, and electronic devices. The idea of something being pre used I thought only came from yard sales, and you didn't have to get things that way. It was just better because they often had toys you couldn't find at a store. The idea of going to bed hungry I thought only happened in third world countries. I had seen homeless people but believed they were alcoholics. In general, anyone struggling for the basics of life I really just didn't understand. My school had a breakfast program for kids who were less well off, and I thought they just went there to hang out with friends or their parents were too lazy to make them breakfast. I didn't understand why some kids couldn't go on field trips. Family vacations seemed normal to me. But I think the worst of it all was believing my family was actually poor. We didn't have the newest toys or electronics as soon as they came out. Our clothes came from Walmart and we were never out of the country for a vacation. My parents were always complaining about not having any money for bills and things they wanted to do, but as I got older, I realized they just didn't manage their money well. We lived in a house they owned, had enough food that a lot of it went bad, had mountains of toys and lots of video games, and were generally getting $500 to $700 worth of new things each Christmas. Living on my own with no financial support from them has taught me a lot, and I'm grateful about that. I just wish I had understood this growing up so I knew how lucky I was. Story 7. A few that comes to mind. First, that kids had to help pay the bills. Second, minor inconveniences for normal people, parking tickets, a malfunctioning fridge, a flat tire, etc., are potentially catastrophic for poor people with no financial cushions. Third, I always thought people talking about their fridge being empty was an exaggeration. Like there's plenty of food, just nothing you want to eat. Then I started dating a girl who didn't have a lot of money, and I opened the fridge door and only saw Hawaiian punch and ketchup. And I was just like, well, damn. And fourth, eating out at restaurants isn't common for everyone. My mom gave a girl on my basketball team a ride home from an away game. I can't remember the reason. We decided to grab a bite to eat and asked her if she had a preference. She picked a buffet place, saying that it is where her family goes. Turns out it was the only restaurant she'd been to other than fast food from time to time. A few months later, she was with us at an Italian place that was slightly upscale. She didn't know how to order, so my mom did it for her. For dessert, she asked for cherry cheesecake and then whispered to me that she'd just scraped the cherries off. I flagged down the server and had them change it to plain cheesecake. I felt so sorry for her because she was just uncomfortable. I also realized I was pretty spoiled and appreciated my parents so much more. Fifth, I went to private school and there was a girl that I assumed was on scholarship or financial aid, and she always smelled really bad. I saw her putting on deodorant in the bathroom once, and I guess I must have stared a second too long, because she told me that she didn't have anything clean to wear because her mom didn't have money for the laundromat that week. I couldn't believe that people had to wear dirty clothes until they could go to the laundromat. I just thought everyone had a washing machine in their house. Story 8. I grew up poor. When I went to prom, a rich girl in one of my classes gave me a dress. She knew my family situation and just brought it to me in a bag a couple of weeks before the dance. I hemmed it and cut off the sleeves. I was at home the day of the prom doing my hair, makeup, and nails all by myself. It shocked me that all the other girls were at salons. I was a punk and wore band tees and combat boots usually. I showed up to the prom looking really good. Everyone was shocked, and the principal even came over to me and commented on how I looked. I hated almost everyone at my school, but that night I felt like I belonged. I can share my experiences growing up poor, like eating 2 pieces of bread with just mustard and ketchup on it for dinner, or when my mom would beg the water company for a few more days to come up with the money for the bill, but they'd shut off our water anyways. We'd use bottled water to bathe and brush our teeth. I'm what you would call well off now, and I appreciate the hell out of everything I have and how far I've come. I'm glad I grew up the way I did, though. I think it made me a better person. I'm not pretentious or judgmental, and I love helping other people out because I can now. Knowing what it is like to actually have nothing, people feel this need to help anyone they come across that is trying to get ahead and out of poverty. The world would be a much better place if we all helped each other a little more and were less judgmental. Story 9. Grew up dirt poor in the country, things middle class people didn't believe. People don't live in single wides because they like it, they do it because it's all they can afford. Out in the sticks, a double wide with good underpinning is middle class. Having a garden is not a whimsical thing that people do for kicks, it can be the only way you can eat decent veggies. A space heater is how you stay warm when keeping the trailer heat on will result in $400 utility bills, and that's more than the rent trailer mortgage. I learned to shoot a weapon at a young age because I had to help put food on the table. A single deer is good meat for a really, really long time. There are people who are one generation removed from outhouses if they haven't actually used one. If there's a snowstorm, canning keeps you alive because the power will be out for 2 weeks sometimes. My grandmother literally fed 10 people one winter for a week and a half. People join the military in relatively high numbers because it's the easiest way out of crushing poverty, or about the only way they're going to college. Story 10. I grew up in a middle class home and am now a teacher in a Title I, aka lower income high school. I always knew that there were people who were less fortunate, but my first year of teaching has been a real eye opener. 5 to 7 kids sit in my room during lunch every day. I noticed that one student either didn't eat or had a Coke and hot Cheetos. I learned that he only sometimes had lunch money, and if he did, it was only $2 to $3. This December, many students didn't have enough warm clothes, and of that portion, most walk 1+ miles to and from school. Many don't have the money for school supplies, let alone lab fees. Only some classes have lab fees, mine don't. I bought big boxes of granola bars and paper binders, etc., to give to the kids whenever they need, but as a fresh from college 22-year-old with $45,000 in debt, there's only so much I can do. It sometimes breaks my heart, but I hope being a good teacher and mentor helps them in ways that money can't. The really messed up part is that many of their parents will always have money for the smokes or grass or beer that they want for themselves. I get super furious at parents who put themselves first and then their kids second. God help them if they're third. Thank you for your career choice and working to make things better for those kids. Story 11. What it meant to not be able to afford something or to be broke. My parents would say, "We can't afford that," but it really meant we'd rather spend that $1,000 on ourselves, on our next vacation, whatever, instead of a new toy computer phone for you. We are broke means we've used too much money in our checking account. We'd still have savings accounts and investments, of course, so no money really just meant no more money that we should be spending right now. Because I grew up this way, I viewed money as something that just magically never ran out. I would get really annoyed when my friends would say, "I can't afford that," or "I'm broke," as a reason for not doing something, because I viewed it as an excuse instead of a reality. The first time as an adult when I literally couldn't afford something because the $50 check I had deposited hadn't gone through, and so my debit card was declined, was a surreal and horrible feeling. I suddenly understood what "I'm broke and I can't afford that" really meant. Story 12. Thought food stamps were stamp books you trade for specific food items. Did not know utilities could be turned off due to non-payment. Did not even realize people didn't pay their bills. My family talks a lot and asks a lot of questions. My husband's family found it very offensive at first, assuming we were prying and they were ashamed of their answers. The kid not going on the field trip wasn't uninterested. His parents didn't have the money for him to go. Many of us thought he was just a bad kid. Same thing with homework. My parents assisted appropriately, other kids had no help at all. Some kids didn't have money to play sports in school. Some kids had to work and give their parents their money to pay bills. And the list goes on forever. I've learned so much from my husband. Well, if you like these stories and were inspired by at least one of them, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thank you for spending your time with me on this one.